Let's pray. Heavenly Father, may my spoken word be faithful to your written word, and in doing so, lead us all closer to the living word, who is your Son, our Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, some of you joined me last Sunday for our Zoom service, and I pointed out that there's a little bit of an issue regarding the Bible readings for Advent this year. You see, we've moved on from focusing on Matthew's Gospel as our main choice of Sunday reading to the Gospel of Mark. We get Mark for the next 12 months. And Mark's Gospel is lovely, but it doesn't mention any of the Christmas story. Nothing. Nada, zip, not a sausage. So, although we had a passage from Mark's Gospel last week, and we've got one this week, for the next 2 weeks we will be dipping first into John's Gospel to consider John the Baptist, and then into Luke's Gospel to hear the retelling of Gabriel's visit to Mary. Which might sound a little bit strange, because we've just heard about John the Baptist today. So thinking about him next week too seems a little bit over the top to me. So instead, I'm going to do something which I think will be more useful for us for the next 12 months. I'm going to introduce Mark's Gospel. So even allowing for the fact that Mark's Gospel is the shortest Gospel, and therefore, when we go through Matthew, Mark, Luke each year, Mark's Gospel gets interfused or suffused or something, or added in with a lot of John's Gospel. So this year you'll get a lot of Mark, but you'll also get quite a lot of John's Gospel. But even if we assume that John's Gospel comes in quite a lot, Mark's Gospel will be the main reading for the vast majority of the Sunday readings in the next 12 months. And that means we'll get it chopped up into about 35 to 40 bite-sized pieces, or a third of a chapter each time we hear it. But if you went to a restaurant for Sunday lunch and they split your roast dinner into 35 to 40 bite-sized pieces, bringing it out a little bit at a time, you'd be flipping furious. I want to open up the entire feast so that we can get a sense of what Mark is trying to share with us this year. So we're going to have a look at those important questions: the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Those kind of questions. And some of them I think and I hope you will already know the answers to, but it's worth reminding ourselves as we're going to be spending so much time looking at Mark over these 12 months. So let's start with who. Who wrote Mark's Gospel? And on the face of it, that sounds really easy to answer. You go, well, it's Mark, isn't it? But actually, with all 4 Gospels, there is no official named author of the text. There's no point at which it goes, I wrote this, signed Mark, or I wrote this, signed John. It doesn't exist. But tradition ascribes the book to a man called John Mark, who appears in the book of Acts. He lived in Jerusalem during the time of the early church, and later on he accompanied his cousin Barnabas and Paul on their first missionary journey. And then eventually he moved on to live in Rome, where he was probably with Peter. If you read the end of 1 Peter, the name Mark shows up at the end of it. Which leads us to when and where. When was it written and where was it written? Because it seems very likely that if we accept John Mark as the author, and most scholars now do, that he wrote his gospel whilst living in Rome and working alongside Peter. And there is certainly some good historical evidence for this in the writings of church leaders from around 130 AD. Now, understandably, there's a little bit of doubt about the date, but when he writes about the fall of Jerusalem, which we heard last week in last week's Sunday reading, and that happened in around in AD 70, Mark seems to be pointing out to his readers that Jerusalem's fate is about to be decided, which means that the fall hadn't happened by the time the gospel was written. Which means that the latest possible date for Mark's gospel is 70 AD, and the earliest likely date is 55 AD. But either way, this is still within a generation of Jesus' death and resurrection. It's the equivalent of somebody writing a biography of Winston Churchill now. There will still have been people alive who were eyewitnesses to what happened, who spoke to Mark. And when you read the gospel, it becomes pretty clear that Peter was the main eyewitness that John Mark spoke to. You can work it out because there's points in Mark's gospel where they go across the lake, and then they go back across the lake, and then they go across the lake. And that's what Peter did all his life. He fished, he went across the lake. So the lake becomes really important in Mark's gospel, or the Sea of Galilee. The likelihood that it was written in Rome also tells us that it was written predominantly for a Roman non-Jewish audience. Which leads us neatly onto what? What is it? What kind of book is it? It's a biography of the adult life of Jesus, told pretty much from the point of view of Jesus' closest disciple, Simon Peter, the one on whom Jesus said he would build his church. But most biographies at least cover something of a person's childhood, even if it's just these days to set up the amazing sob stories that are now a legal requirement if you want to win Britain's Got Talent or the X Factor. Mark, on the other hand, chooses to completely ignore Jesus' birth and upbringing. He doesn't even mention his age or the length of his ministry. And it's pretty abrupt at the other end of the gospel too. There's no resurrection appearance, just an empty tomb and an angel with a message from God. There are some alternative endings to Mark, but they are almost certainly editorial additions to the original gospel. So they're not part of the original bit. The truth is that Peter wasn't around when Jesus was born or when he was growing up, so he doesn't have those narratives to share with Mark, certainly not firsthand anyway. So it becomes a simple account of the time that Peter spent with Jesus. And Mark has got a really simple theme to the whole of what he's writing too. You can sum it up in 7 words. Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that this gospel was written for a non-Jewish audience. Of course, a Jew would have asked a slightly different question. They wouldn't have said, is Jesus Christ the Son of God? They would have said, is Jesus the Messiah? Because they were looking for this royal figure who would come and establish his kingdom. And because around the time of Jesus' birth, Israel was occupied by Roman forces, there were lots of people who were hoping that the Messiah would come and overthrow the Romans in order to establish his kingdom. But Mark uses the word Messiah only a handful of times in the whole of his gospel. Whereas he makes reference to Jesus as the Son on numerous occasions. For example, he says, Son of David, the Son of Man, my Son, the Son, Son of the Blessed, Son of God, or Son of the Most High God. And that amounts to, by my count, no less than 25 references to Jesus as the Son in a gospel of only 16 chapters. And which is the last of those references? Well, it's at the moment of Jesus' death when a Roman centurion watching on says, truly this man was the Son of God. Which leaves us with how and why. Well, we've already started to address the how, so let's go a little bit further. We can split Mark's gospel into 2 halves with a little tiny middle section. The first half, chapters 1 to 8, go right for the jugular in covering Mark's main theme. They ask, who is Jesus? So in chapter 1, Jesus is baptized, and we hear a voice from heaven saying, you are my beloved Son. And then there's a host of healings, particularly of people with unclean spirits. And each time those unclean spirits recognize Jesus. They go, you're the Holy One of God, or you're the Son of God, or you're the Son of the Most High God. But also Jesus heals people and he makes them clean by touching them. By Jewish law, that should make him unclean. But instead, he is absolutely fine, and the condition that was affecting the individual is gone. And he heals paralytics by telling them that their sins are forgiven. Only God can do that. He calms the storm. Only God has power like that over nature. And he even has power to raise people from the dead, like Jairus' daughter. Mark is laying out the case that Jesus isn't just some bloke going around doing good things in God's name. He is doing things that can only be done by God himself. Then comes that crucial middle section of Mark, sort of chapters 8 to 10 roughly. Towards the end of chapter 8, Jesus asks his disciples, who do you say I am? And you probably all know that it's Peter who pipes up with the answer. It's one of those rare moments in Mark when that word Messiah crops up. It's there translated from the Greek Christos as Christ. You are the Christ. So having followed him around for 8 chapters, his disciples have actually twigged Jesus is the promised Messiah. But then in this crucial section, Jesus tells them how he is going to establish his kingdom. And it is nothing like they are expecting. Instead of overthrowing the Romans, he's going to suffer and be killed by them. And as he puts it himself in Mark 10, verse 45, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And unsurprisingly, this plan causes much confusion, fear, and disbelief amongst his disciples, even when Jesus tries to explain on 3 separate occasions what will happen. Which launches us into the second half of the book, where Mark explains exactly what Jesus had explained that he was going to do. He explains how Jesus became the Messianic King. And it's the events of Holy Week. And who's the first person out of everybody who puts it all together and gets what Jesus is doing? It's that Roman centurion stood at the foot of the cross. Isn't it amazing that a gospel that is written for a predominantly Jewish audience spots the person who picks it out first as a Roman? Even right at the end of the gospel, Jesus' own followers are still struggling to get their head around it all. When the women visit the tomb and find it empty, they run off, not knowing what to do. But the one Roman who shouldn't have anything to do with it at all gets it. And as I said, the book ends as abruptly as it started. Mark is inviting us to ask the question in response to the very first sentence that he writes, which we heard today. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Like the women at the tomb, we're being invited to ask ourselves, is this really true? Is he the Son of God? And if so, what are we going to do about it? Which leads us to that final question for today. Why did Mark write it? Well, I've kind of just said it really. Mark makes his beliefs abundantly clear in the first line of the book. He believes that Jesus was and is the Son of God, the Messiah King. And if that's true, then what he has written is good news for the entire world. But it also means that we are called to respond. And particularly in Mark's gospel, we are called to cross-bearing discipleship, to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Jesus. So this year, as we journey through Mark's Gospel together, I pray that you will be able to keep that overall picture in mind as we explore each passage, and that you will keep asking yourselves 3 questions. 1, what does this passage tell me about who Jesus is? 2, what does that mean for me? And 3, what do I need to do in response? Amen.